Well, hello and welcome to the show this evening. This is a bit different tonight. We've got Dharmesh from Sky Sports, as you can probably tell, joining us today. And this is going to be a bi-weekly show, isn't it, Dharmesh? You're doing it alongside Patreon, is that right?
Yes. 1 week with you, 1 week with Patreon.
You are so lucky. You're a really spoilt man. You are.
I am.
Really.
I am.
Very lucky man. How have you been? There? You been all right?
I'm very, very well. Yeah. Finally, it's been quite a busy window, to be fair, because of this unofficial first deadline that they had of June the 30th, when certain clubs, even they won't admit to being like sailing close to the wind with regards to PSR. There seemed to be a lot of deals getting done before then. So it was like £200 million were exchanged hands before June the 30th. And even though nothing official, and they're never going to say that they were close to breaching PSR rules, the mere fact that a lot of these deals happened would probably suggest that some clubs were a bit closer to it than they would have liked. So the impression we're getting now, though, that everyone's confident that they're operating within those rules now. So
that's good. Yeah. I'm regarding West Ham, we're in pretty healthy ground, aren't we, in terms of PSR?
Yeah, I mean, there weren't any noises about West Ham United and PSR. Of course, every club is going to make sure that they're operating within those rules. But I don't think that would have been an issue with West Ham, particularly because if you look, I know they spent big money, but they also got big money as well. You don't need me to remind you what happened last summer. I mean, to get £105 million for Declan Rice, that's going to help the coffers. And just to give you an idea of how it works, it's like when you spend money and receive money, it's very different how it looks in the books. So the Declan Rice 105 million, West Ham can put that straight into their accounts as 105 million. Whereas when they bought, I don't know, let's use Mohamed Kudus as an example. I think it was over £40 million they spent on Kudus, but it won't be £40 million that goes out of the account in that year. They will have organized the deal whereby they will say, we'll pay you X million year one, X million year two, X million year three. So all that will go in the accounts for year one is how much they gave in year one.
Absolutely.
So when you sell for big money and buy, if you're making a profit, a pure profit on, the sales compared to the purchases, then it shows up as even more of a profit, if you get what I mean, in that year. Yeah. So I don't think West Ham were in any danger going into this one.
Good. It's good to hear, and it does feel like, I mean, the club have been criticised by the fans, including myself included, over the years for being so tight and struggling. But then, there are times like this now, especially with these PSR rules, where the club's been very careful. I do think actually it's probably paid off in the end, really, because we seem to be in pretty decent shape. Dharmesh, England. Before we're talking, England were in the final. How the hell did that happen? Did you watch the game?
Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of chats with people. Oh, Southgate this, Southgate that, and whatever. I was just relax. It's coming home.
You knew, didn't you? You just knew.
I mean, look, there's one more game, but I've got to stick by it now. I mean, it's going to be hard Sunday. Don't get me wrong. I think everyone can safely say that Spain are the best team in the tournament, but England have been a grower, and they just like when you look at certain moments, and I know this phrase, names written on the trophy gets bandied about a lot, but the Bellingham goal, number one. I mean, then you get the situation where you go behind against Switzerland as well. I actually thought when they went behind against Switzerland, I thought that's it. I genuinely thought that was it that time, even though I was being quite bullish. I said, oh, no, they'll equalize. And then Saka pulls that one out. Last night, I've got to say, I wasn't that worried even when Netherlands scored. A, because it was so early, and B, you could just see the way they were playing. Hold on, so they're onto something now. They're starting to play, and the whole thing about the balance, and as he picked the right players, and then he brings Luke Shaw on for 45 minutes, having brought him on for a few for minutes that were less than 45 in the previous game. He's now building up his fitness, and then you think, is a possibility he could start now in the final or get even more minutes in the final. He's got options now. And just look at that squad. I think they've got, you could argue if you look at the full 26-man squad, I'd be hard pushed to to find a better squad. You could argue France to a certain degree. Spain are amazing, don't get me wrong, but they've got a really young team as well, and players coming off the bench. I don't know whether they have got as many match winners off the bench as England have got. So that's what I'm counting on. It's not just the first 11, it's what happens when the substitutions are made.
Yeah, and I get the feeling there's a bit of momentum with England now. Do you know what I mean? I think that belief, and like you say, like I was the same as you. When we went on 1-0 down against the Netherlands, I thought it's okay. We're going to come back into this. I'm pretty confident we'll score. And I'll get that feeling against Spain as well. I think if Spain go 1-up, I think okay, don't panic. You know what I mean? We're in good shape. It's really exciting, and this is going to lead you obviously to the transfer update of West Ham, mate, where you tell us that obviously Ollie Watkins is going to be joining. I'm sure you're going to confirm that, aren't you? Is that right?
No, not at the moment. No talks, no approach.
That's disappointing.
No interest at the minute.
Okay. Well, that'll be next week, I'm assuming. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Good luck.
How are things at West Ham at the moment? Are we? Well, I know we've been pretty busy so far. Probably one of the busiest, I think, clubs at the moment because of obviously a bit of a lot of change with Lopetegui coming in, etc. Have we got some updates from yourself in terms of where things are?
I mean, the Kilman one was the big one. Within Premier League clubs so far, it's the most amount of money that's been spent. Of course, there was the amount of money that Bayern Munich spent on Michael Olise, and of course what Bayern Munich spent on João Palhinha as well will exceed. But between two Premier League clubs so far, I think it's the most with Max Kilman. It seems like a win to me. There are 4 wins here. West Ham get the player that they wanted. Yeah. You got Wolves getting £40 million, even though they didn't want to let him go. He only signed a new contract last summer. He was captain as well. Yeah. Max Kilman as well gets a fantastic move. And Maidenhead, which I think is the best part of this story, whereby when they sold him for 40 grand in 2018, and, let's just stick a sell-on clause. And, in hindsight, they'll always say, we knew. He was brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. But you'd never do. There must be another 100 players where they don't get to the levels that Max Kilman does get to from non-league. But for them to put that sell-on clause in, and initially we thought it was 15 to 20%. So they would have got £6 to £8 million out of this deal. I think there was some negotiation. It hasn't been publicized, but I think there was some sort of negotiation about that sell-on clause for that deal to go through. And we had, I think it was the chairman or the vice chairman on Sky Sports News when this deal went through, and we put it to him, look, at £6 to £8 million. And he actually said, look, it's not that much, which would imply there would have been some sort of negotiation between West Ham, Wolves and Maidenhead about this. And we think that they'll still clear around £4 million, which is, for a non-league club like Maidenhead, is like,
it's ridiculous.
Some could say life-changing. Some could say, well, at least it's going to look after them for a few years at least. So absolutely, what a deal all round. That was my favorite part of the story. I know, there's still a little bit of romance around. We I love Premier League transfers, but for someone to come through the non-league and then the non-league club to benefit from it, I think is absolutely fantastic. So, the Kilman one was big for West Ham. There's other stuff happening in the background as well, and that's going to depend, I think, on departures as well. Okay. With regard to West Ham United, we do know that they're in the market for a central defender. Angelo Ogbonna, of course, left after his contract expired at West Ham. There are huge doubts about Naif Aguerd and Kurt Zouma. They could yet stay, of course, but there's interest from Saudi Arabia and Europe as well in those two players. And depending on if one of those leave, then that will probably dictate how many centre-backs West Ham United will be in the market for. They're definitely in the market for one. It could turn into 2, depending on the future of one of those 2 players as well. And the players that West Ham are looking at has been well publicised. There's the Jake O'Brien situation where, there's a strong interest in this player, Republic of Ireland international. We don't know whether there's been a formal bid as yet, but given that the interest is still strong, you would expect a formal approach and a formal bid to come sooner rather than later from West Ham United. They have tried to push the boat out and tried to get Jean-Claire Todibo, which looks like a really ambitious one, given the number of clubs that are interested in him. They got a €30 million bid rejected for Jean-Claire Todibo by Nice. I think internal discussions will continue about whether it's realistic to go back in with an improved offer or focus on other targets. But those two, to name two players in the central defensive department, to add to Max Kilman as well, that's a situation you find West Ham in at the moment. And then you've got a situation further up the pitch where they are looking to strengthen as well. Jhon Duran, there's a huge interest in Jhon Duran from Aston Villa. We did our Transfer Talk podcast at Sky Sports News yesterday. The guest we had on was a guy called Sam Tai, who's a bit of a football expert on all things football, actually. And I was asking him about this potential of Jhon Duran and what he would bring. And he said he'd bring chaos. He would bring chaos in a good way for most of the time. And sometimes not in such a good way. He says every time he sees him play, he occupies defenders. He gives them grief. He's really raw. He gets booked a lot. But if you're in in an environment whereby, you can mold a player like that and just hone his skills, it could be, if West Ham were to get this deal over the line, still a long way from that happening, of course. Add to that, he's still with Colombia at the Copa America. I think they got through to the final, didn't they? They're going to be playing Argentina. So you'd expect that one to accelerate once the Copa America is over. But it is definitely the one that West Ham United are looking at. It would be a really interesting signing. And I think Aston Villa will be, just looking at this situation because they don't want to be in a position where 4 or 5 seasons down the line, they're going to think, we should never have sold this guy. We should never have sold this guy. So hence why it could take a little bit of time, whether Aston Villa are going to fully decide, yes, you're allowed to go or you're not allowed to go. And then the last one was Reiss Nelson. There's been, I would say, a longish standing interest in Reiss Nelson. We do know that his game time has been limited, of course, over the past couple of seasons, even though he did sign a new contract at Arsenal not too long ago. But the information we have there is that he wants to assess every single option now that's going to be on the table. Let's see if West Ham is a concrete option for him, because there's definitely interest in him.
Yeah, he's a player that I admire quite a lot, but Nelson, actually. I think he'd do well. And he's one of those that you kind of look at when he's been at Arsenal, not really been given that chance. And not in a bad way. I just think it's because the players ahead of him, it's so difficult to break into that side. And, you do wonder whether a move to West Ham would really suit him, because he'd come in to be one of the main players straight in and can show what he can do. So I think that'd be quite exciting. With Duran, you were saying about still a little way to go on it. Do you think that the personal terms will be a bit of a stumbling block, or maybe is it to do with West Ham and Villa? Where do you think that's sort of sitting at the moment?
I mean, as far as we know at the moment, it's interest at the moment. It's a strong interest in the player. We're waiting for West Ham United to go in with a bid. Now, look, sometimes how transfers work, and the way they're supposed to work is you speak to the club, you make the bid, you get the bid agreed and the deal agreed, and then you speak to the player. Yeah. Now, how it happens, it's kind of unspoken, but it tends to happen in a way that if West Ham United go in with a bid for Jhon Duran and it's an official bid, chances are there will have been some indication or some kind of noise from the players' camp that they'd be open to that move. So West Ham United, clubs don't want to waste time. I know some, you might look at it and say, is that a form of tapping up? Well, not really, because they're not actually going behind maybe the club's back or anything like that. It's maybe just an indication that, look, if we were to pursue this deal, there is a chance that the player would want to come. Then, of course, once the transfer fee is sorted, then you've got the full official approaching of the player, and then the personal terms will have to be right for the player and be right for West Ham United, because I'm sure West Ham United will have a structure in place as well, which they probably wouldn't want to break. So, look, transfers can be easy. They can be very complicated as well. And that's the situation that you get more and more players when they join clubs now. They've got release clauses in their contract. Sometimes that makes it easier. Because a club knows if they meet the release clause, they don't have to deal with the club at all. Right. Okay. They can just go, they can just get, once they meet the release clause, they can speak to the player. Having said that, even release clauses can be negotiated upon. It's something we've just been, a bit of information I've just been given now, and it's not to do with West Ham United. You all have been aware that Manchester United have been after Joshua Zirkzee from Bologna. He had a 40 million euro release clause. Now, everything was, United were prepared to meet that release clause. Hence, they could speak to his representatives. They got everything sorted on the representative side, but then they still wanted to talk to Bologna. And people will say, well, there's a release clause, so why do they need to speak to Bologna? Well, United actually wanted to negotiate the release clause. And people think, right, do they want to bring the release clause down? No. They are going to actually pay a little bit more than the release clause. And people will say, well, why would they want to do that when they could have got him for less money? Simply because if you meet a release clause, in this case, it's 40 million euros, the club has to pay that 40 million euros straight away. Done.
Oh,
Whereas
really?
they've now negotiated with Bologna a higher transfer fee, which is 42.5 million euros, but they will be paying that over a 3-year period. So in exchange for a higher price overall, they've got more favorable payment terms. And I think Bologna are probably happier with that side of the deal as well, because some of the players that they have on their books, like Zirkzee, like Calafiori, they have got sell-on clauses from their previous clubs. So not only when Bologna receive all this money, they need to send some money elsewhere, rather like Maidenhead inserted that sell-on clause with Max Kilman. So that's where we are with the Duran situation at the moment. Still a long way to go. And I think if and when it does accelerate, it will be after the Copper.
Yeah, that's my anticipation as well. Funny enough, I looked at a quote from the player himself, and he said this actually when he was linked to Chelsea, and he was saying before the tournament, and basically said what you've just said there. Like, you know, his focus at the moment is on the Copa America, so he's not going to be looking to talk about anything else until that's done. So that's my belief as well. I've got a feeling it'll probably be next week that we'll hopefully start to see a bit of movement on that. And one other player I wanted to mention to you was Kyle Walker-Peters.
Yes.
We seem to be linked with him a fair bit, Southampton. I know there's talk of Flynn Downs as well being a bit of an obstacle because they want him. Is there any indication that's moving forward, or is that still ongoing?
At the moment, it's been painted to us as two separate deals. So you've got a situation now where, of course, let's start with Flynn Downs. Went on loan to Southampton last season, had an incredible season for them last season, helped them to promotion. And I don't know whether you saw some of the celebrations outside the stadium, after Southampton got promoted. And Russell Martin, the manager, when Flynn Downs came on to the stage, he was starting the song Sign Him Up. Even he was starting it. So it's clear Southampton want him. With both the Downs deal and the Kyle Walker-Peters deal, the clubs are in talks over both of these players. However, it's a similar situation with both, in that at the moment, there's a gap in valuation between what West Ham are prepared to pay for Kyle Walker-Peters and what Southampton want, and what Southampton are prepared to pay for Flynn Downs and what West Ham United want. You would think because there are players that could go either way, it would be an easier deal to do, but it seems like it's slightly more complicated, because West Ham will look at it and say, well, Kyle Walker-Peters is entering the final year of his contract, so we're going to take that into account. Why should we be paying, premium money for someone who's only got 12 months left of his contract and by all accounts is not going to sign a new contract as it stands? And then you've got a situation with Flynn Downs whereby it's clear that Southampton really, really desperately want this player. Whereas West Ham might paint it as, well, Kyle Walker-Peters, yes, they're very interested in him, but he's one of a number of right backs, which is the case, case as well. There's even noise surrounding Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and there's a similar situation there at United. He's entered the final year of his contract. So there are things bubbling there in that position. It's clear that would be a priority position for West Ham. They've obviously got Vladimir Kufal in that position at the moment. Ben Johnson, who can play there, and he drifted into midfield. You'll know more than me, having watched West Ham week in, week out. But he's, he was offered a 5-year contract, decided, actually, for the sake of my football career, I think this is the time to make the move. And he saw out his contract, and he was on a free transfer to Ipswich. So it's probably one of the priority positions, aside of the ones that I've already been speaking about.
Yeah, it's exciting time, mate. It's, certainly from West Ham perspective, we're all kind of anticipating. We were anticipating a busy summer anyway, but I'm quite excited by the fact West Ham seem to be getting ahead of the game a little bit, which is quite rare for us. We tend to do our business quite late. I'm guessing that's going to be the case with a few of these deals. Like it always tends to be that these clubs drag it out, to try and get the best deal and see, look at their options until the end. But yeah, it's looking exciting, mate. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, Dharmesh, and giving us an update. And will you be back then in a couple of weeks? Am I right in thinking on this channel?
I will be, yes. I will be.
That will really please my missus, by the way. For people that don't know, right, I think my missus has got a bit of a thing for Dharmesh. I've told you about this before. So when I mentioned it, I said to her, I went, oh, yeah, I'm recording with Dharmesh. Oh, how are you? Well, what time's that? And all that. And she seems to take an interest in watching the videos then when you're appearing. It's weird.
Well, that's one more view.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it quiet in future. She said to say hello to you, but I'm not going to do that. Oh, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And yeah, I'll speak to you very soon. Cheers.
Nice one. Cheers, Mark.
Take care, Dharmesh. Bye.